Oh, thank you so much, Chair Vera, and thank you to all the witnesses. It's been really interesting so far. I wanted to ask, I know we've talked a lot about UNCLOS, and I agree with my colleagues that we should ratify it and that there are a lot of drawbacks to not doing so. But let's take as a hypothetical that the Senate does not do what we want them to do and does not ratify it. And I was hoping, Ms. Glazer, you could talk about what other options we might have in that scenario. How would we be able to enforce international law of the sea in South China Sea and East China Sea, and mitigate some of those drawbacks that have been so clearly articulated about not ratifying?
Well, thank you for the question, but I'm afraid that I think that there are very few options for the United States to enforce international law in the South China Sea if we are not a member of UNCLOS, because we cannot shape the rules. Certainly, we can enforce freedom of navigation by conducting FONOPs and presence operations. We have that option available to us. We can help by, as others have talked about, uh, bolstering the maritime domain awareness of littoral states so that they know what is going on inside of their exclusive economic zones, and that might deter some of China's illegal behavior. This is an ongoing program that we, of course, should continue to bolster those capabilities. But in terms of international law, UNCLOS is really all I think that is basically available. The Chinese are the ones that have ratified the treaty but are not abiding by it, and the United States, of course, stands outside the treaty, but we are essentially respecting it as a matter of customary law. And I think that many countries in the world don't even understand what that means or why we take this position. It's baffling to the world. And the United States, therefore, is charged by China, as others have said, as being hypocritical. So I don't think we really have the means. I'm not an international maritime lawyer, but I don't really think we have other legal means available to us. We can use diplomatic means, certainly. We can encourage the code of conduct to include the right provisions. We have military means, but I don't think there's alternative legal means.
Thank you. Do any of the other witnesses want to comment on our
I'll
alternative?
jump in. I'll jump in closely, quickly if I could. And this goes back to, I would agree with Bonnie. The only other alternative is diplomatic. There's a disconnect between diplomacy and what we do in the military. And it goes back to my comments with respect to a relevancy of the United States and now the legitimacy piece. So the problem with FONOPS right now is the United States has drifted from the strategic concept and objectives of FONOPS. Peer competitors recognize this, primary of that being China, that's the most advanced and adept at adopting the approach. And they get their word out on a FONOP before the US does, and their word is consistent. These are actions of a fated regional colonial hegemony, using military power to back up a failed form of government, ensuring the region remains destabilized, and prevent the nations of the regions from self-determination. And because of their use of force and coercion, other nations are reluctant to speak up. That's why the comment about the EU strategy being published was so important. So we need to take a playbook from our allies, partners, and friends and be careful about taking a page from the playbook of the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party in our response. That's even more important if we don't become a party to UNCLOS.
Congresswoman Danny Russell here. If I could add, the situation and the challenge set that the United States and our allies and partners face in the maritime space in the Indo-Pacific is so serious that we simply don't have the luxury of opting to ignore one of the limited tools at our disposal. So legal tools, diplomatic tools, military tools, economic tools, all of these need to be applied as part of a coherent strategy with enough enthusiasm and resolve that our partners are convinced that we really mean it, we're here to stay, and that our adversaries are convinced of the same thing.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Great, thank you. And with that, that's our last speaker. And Mr. Russell, I think you summed it up that we need an American strategy to the region. We as Congress have a real role in laying out what that strategy looks like, and we have to play the long game here, so that there is certainty with our allies in the region, but also certainty that our adversaries understand that we're here to stay. And again, that takes all of our resources: diplomacy, defense, strategic partnerships with our allies, and in some ways marrying a transatlantic and trans-Pacific strategy together as well. And then I will just put out there having an economic strategy in the region, that will allow us to compete and bring nations together. So I want to thank each of the witnesses for your testimony, your service to our country, and with